Oh, technical difficulties. I dropped my spotlight. Hi, everyone. I'm back. Welcome to week two. Thanks for joining me again for another fun week in the master's research course. I do want to speak to you briefly tonight about ethics in action research. Um, Ethics in action research can be slightly different from ethical considerations in education research in general. So, in terms of general educational research, traditionally you would seek out approval from an IRB, usually affiliated with the institution where you're doing your research. Um, and in action research, that can often be the case too. But for our purposes, you are not going to need IRB approval. However, before you consider collecting data or working with participants, you do want to get your approval directly from me, and also potentially from your building leadership, should you be doing some kind of project with any of your students. So it's really, really important that before any research takes place, that every ethical consideration that you can possibly think of has been thoroughly and thoughtfully examined. And the reason I want you to get that approval before you move forward from me and from potentially from building administration, is just to really make sure that we cross those T's and dot the I's, and in terms of our really strong adherence to our code of ethics, and making sure that we don't violate any of those various codes. Doing no harm in research is the first and foremost, most important thing that you need to consider when you're planning a research project. And because educational research and action research in particular is often dealing with students who are minors, I can't underscore enough how important this step in the process is. So do be really mindful to look in great depth for any kind of ethical concern or consideration. I want to throw back to the examples I gave you in week one in terms of um, the ideas for research that I threw out as examples, and kind of pinpoint where ethical considerations might need to be examined for those projects. Um, in my first example, I talked about offering an optional Zoom session to graduate students. Excuse me. Um, so Off the top of my head, I don't have any particular concerns about ethics or doing harm in the way of offering an optional Zoom session. But before I endeavored this project, the first thing that I would do is get an informed consent letter written and then signed by all of the students in my course. I would want them to know that I'm looking into a study on engagement, that they are more than willing to opt out of the study, always offering the option to opt out of the study, and know that there would be no retaliatory efforts on my behalf, that their participation in the study was completely and utterly voluntary. Um, in the example of changing a learning strategy for kindergarten students in sight words, you would first want to make sure that it's okay with your principal that you engage in a study on an instructional practice. Um, your principal may or may not want you to reach out to parents to explain to them the study that you're doing. When you're using any students as participants, you will never ever use them by any kind of identifiable name in your research. So if your student's name is uh, Joe Smith, then you might call him student one, and so on and so forth. So again, never using any names, never using any specific building names, school names, principal names, just leave it all out there. So when you do write up any reports, know that anonymity is going to be hugely important. Um, in terms of an observational study like the one I described, where you're just tallying when students are asleep or not asleep, or engaged or not engaged, um, that is going to be an important discussion that you and I have together in terms of the process for your study. And then we would talk specifically about where you would go in terms of informed consent from parents and working with a principal on that. So because we're doing action research, and because the intent of doing this research is for a graduate program and not with the intent necessarily to publish, that's the reason why that IRB approval is something that we're not going to have to seek out. But again, keeping in mind that this is not the purpose of this course is not for you to create a publishable paper. So do know that when you're looking to publish, there are more rigorous steps to take in terms of IRB approval and the process as a whole. So hopefully that gets you started in thinking about ethical considerations, and do make sure to read the textbook chapter very carefully on this section. It's really important. And please reach out if you have any questions at any time, as always. Thanks.